there was no criteria, obviously, to do this. So for me, I looked at the things that you would expect a person to look at when they are going to do something like this. What is the player's peak? And how long the player's peak was, and how long, like, was the high peak? Like, for me, I think the thing that I always came back to was like, how long were you really, 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 really good for? That was the thing. And then playoff success, obviously playoff success is like right underneath that. And then just like, there were some guys, and this is where it gets dicey because it gets into narratives, and like, you never know why narratives start, especially narratives that existed, 20, 30 years before you were born. But I felt like if you can't tell the story of the NBA without including a name, that held some weight with me. So
that's interesting. I'm curious because I skimmed the newsletter and saw who your no-brainers were, and a lot of them were, like you said, no-brainers. There wasn't anybody that I objected to because like the different eras of like when the NBA mattered, let alone when did this player matter to the NBA is different.
Yeah, and it gets dicier when we go further down the list with some of the older guys. Anyway, okay, so let's do what you want to hear. Okay, so I'm going to break my top 15 down into, I actually didn't, so I sent Andrew a little spreadsheet. I have my top 15 broken down into 4 tiers on the spreadsheet I sent you. It's actually 5 tiers because the top 5 players there's 2 tiers. So my top tier of the top 15 players of all time is number 1, Michael Jordan, number 2, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, number 3, LeBron James. I think those 3 players are in a class above everybody else.
Interesting. Okay.
And I'm not going to say I don't think it's close because I think there are some really wonderful Bill Russell arguments out there. Bill Simmons made an impassioned one in his book. I don't know when you just look at the results of what Jordan, Kareem, and LeBron did in terms of like literally everything, MVPs, championships, just generally being considered like this guy was the best player in his sport for this amount of time. And there's really no debate about that. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Kareem has more points than anybody, that kind of matters. I don't know how you could have anybody other than those 3. So those are the first 3. Any, I'll check. I feel like I should check in with you after each of these. Just
the GOAT argument for you apparently isn't LeBron or MJ. It's it's MJ or Kareem.
So this will be my first one of these. I'm going to go back to this several times. Flip a coin between Kareem and LeBron. Literally flip a coin. If you ask me,
can you spell it out? What's the case for Kareem over LeBron? For anybody that hears this and is like, LeBron's the GOAT. What are you talking about?
I mean, 6 MVPs off the top of my head because I didn't research these players too much because they're like I've thought about this stuff a lot. 6 MVPs I think is important. Although the fact that Kareem played in large part during what is considered a pretty weak era or a strange era in NBA history. The 70s were kind of a funky time. ABA, some drug issues. So, do you like lessen the weight of some of those MVPs? 6 MVPs is 6 MVPs. One finals MVP, I believe, was 14 years apart or 15 years apart, whatever. I think he won in 71 and then 85. And then you look at, again, not that all NBA team is the be all end all, but I mean, he was the best center in the league. Again, like basically 15 years apart. Now you could say LeBron James was the best player in the league, 13, 14 years apart. One guy has 3 championships and the other guy has more. I think championships matter here. I think we've kind of forgotten the fact, and this will come up again in a few moments. Those first 2 Lakers championships in the 80s, those were Kareem's first and foremost. Magic was the second guy on those teams. So like Kareem has 3 championships as the best player on his team. LeBron James has 3 championships as the best player on his team. It's picking nits. It's absolutely picking nits. If you want to say LeBron's the second best player ever, I'm certainly not going to argue with you.
Okay, that's fair. I think. I mean, look, the Kareem argument, I guess not necessarily falls apart, but I guess where I'd lean LeBron is more how close we're gonna get to a teammate of Kareem's, and then how further down on your list we get until we get to a LeBron teammate. But like you said, like that's not to minimize the accomplishments that he did on his own. You know.
Yeah.
Only one of those titles without Magic, right? Or was two of them without Magic? No, only one of those was without Magic. So he won 6 titles. The first one in Milwaukee, and then the other 5 were in the 80s with Magic.
So yeah, I mean, Kareem's career is like really fascinating because when he came, see, that's the other thing. Like, I think people remember the fact that Kareem hung on for like those couple of extra years where he was averaging like, you know, whatever he was averaging, not a ton of points towards the very end there. But like, go back and look at his first several years. Like the man averaged 35 points a game, you know, as a third-year player. He like walked in averaging 30 points. Like, yes, on the second Laker championship team in 1989, he was, and this is really where the case for LeBron is where you want to look at 88, 89, and you want to look at those championship series and say like, okay, Kareem, or excuse me, 80, 87 and 88, and say like, you know, what was Kareem on those teams? Like, I'll give you that. Had James Worthy passed him, you know, in 88 and maybe by 87 even. Kareem averaged in the 2000 or in the 1988 finals 13 points a game. In the 87 finals, he averaged 17 points a game. I don't know. But he was still on the team. He was definitely one of the top 3 guys.
I would say the case for him all time, like the GOAT case for him, if you want to put him in the top 3. And look, I don't want to spend too much time on the top 3, but just the only thought is like his 1969 to I guess 1982 stretch where he was averaging, I think he averaged over 30 points a game total, is that's the case right there. You know? Excuse
me, he averaged 21 in the 87 finals. That's my bad. Yeah, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
So that's really you have it, John. That's your top 3 of all time.
That's the top 3. Okay. Next up in a tier by themselves, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain.
The old heads are going to be mad at you.
I mean, that's great for them.
I'm just letting you know.
Like, go fucking look up Wilt Chamberlain's numbers that he put up, and then Bill Russell.
Oh no! They're saying like how is Russell not 2 or 1? Is what I'm saying. Not that they're too high. I'm saying the old heads will be mad at you.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Kareem obviously played with Magic Johnson and James Worthy and an older Oscar Robertson. Pretty good players, right? Like when I was putting together my top 75, spoiler alert, a lot of names are going to be on here, or quite a few names are going to be on here that played with Bill Russell. And those guys were in the primes of their career. And like, no doubt about it, guys. And he got to play with all those guys. And that's always been the argument, right? Against Russell being top 2, top 3 is of who he got to play with, the organizational stability, obviously, you know, coach, the whole thing.
9 teams. Yeah.
What?
The NBA had 9 teams.
The NBA had 9 teams. That's honestly, so the thing that I kept coming back to when I was putting together this list is, and like, I think the 9 teams doesn't even really drive home. I actually looked at how many players were in the league during a lot of those. There were less than 100. There were like some years where there was like 91 players in the league. You know,
maybe it wasn't the globalized conglomerate that it is now. It was, like you could have had a job a lot of these guys had jobs in the off season, you know, and like, okay, so Bill Russell was maybe the best player in the league for a couple of those years. Probably had Bob Cousy, you could argue. I mean, we'll get into, you know, the Bob Pettits of the world and like a couple other guys, but like, was Bob Cousy the second best player in the league, third best player in the league for a couple of those years? Yeah, maybe. To say nothing of the fact that like, what was John Havlicek towards the tail end of Russell's career when he was winning championships in the late 60s. Mm-hmm. As far as, again, him over Wilt, again, flip a coin between those two. They're in a tier by themselves. I do just want to note, it was interesting to me. So Wilt never played
with another Hall of Famer in his prime, but he did play with 6 guys who, I don't know should I spoil it? Well, let me just say, no, I'm not going to spoil it. He played with 5 guys who made my top 75 and a 6th guy who has a really, really great argument to make the top 75 and was just on the outside looking in. He didn't play with any of those players in their primes. One of those players, there was positional overlap, but like Wilt played with talent. He didn't play with Russell's talent though. So that's why I feel kind of bad putting him 5th and Russell 4th, but that's where I have him.
Yeah, I don't. They had way too many head-to-head matchups that led to Russell coming out victorious. I get it. Team accomplishments should never be against one player. But back then, it just became a narrative that, like, if Wilt, like, you would take Bill Russell over Wilt Chamberlain in a game 7, you know? And
here's the other thing. I wrote this down. I forgot to mention it. So Bill Russell, this is back when the players voted on MVP. Mm-hmm. So Bill Russell, his rookie year, walked into the league, was voted 7th in MVP. Here were his MVP finishes over the preceding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 4, 3. And then he wasn't on the ballot for a year. When the Celtics had kind of a down year, and then his last year ever playing in the NBA, he finished 4th in MVP.
Player coach MVP, yeah.
But yeah,
player coach MVP, yeah.
So, Bill fucking Russell.
It's Bill fucking Russell. I just go back to, like, yes, he played 13 seasons, won 11 titles in a league with 9 teams. I know. Where when baseball ran the country, but look, I'm not going to reject the Bill Russell being in the top 4 players all time, and Wilt's accomplishments speak for themselves.
Okay. Next tier, 3 players. Number 6, Larry Bird. Number 7, Magic Johnson. Number 8, Tim Duncan.
So I will say we have the same top 8. Like, I have a different order, but we have the same top 8.
So Duncan, I flip-flop between putting him ahead of Bird and Magic and then putting him behind Bird and Magic. And my justification for ultimately putting him number 8 behind both of those guys is at no time, I'm aware Tim Duncan won 2 MVPs. At no time do I think were we ever able to look at Tim Duncan and be like unequivocally, oh, that guy's the best player in basketball, let alone that guy's the best player in basketball by, like, he's clearly like the best guy in basketball, because we went from Shaq to Kobe to LeBron. And I think there were arguments for each of those other guys over Duncan at every point in time. I don't know if they were good arguments, but they were legitimate arguments. And Duncan, I feel like, again, we are picking, as you always say with Oz on Final Review. I mean, this is the ultimate in quibbles. It's quibbling. I mean, who do you put? It's Larry Bird and Magic friggin' Johnson.
Yeah.
Again, though, like Duncan, I almost had him higher because just the length, like his career, which is why I think if you were starting a team today, and you're either going to get Duncan's career, Bird's career, or Magic's career, I think you take Duncan's career because of how long it lasted and how good he was for those number of years, which is why I originally had him 6th and then Bird and then Magic. But when you go back and look at how good Larry Bird was, when there was for 9 straight years, and Magic, you could say the same thing, different 9 years, but close, like there was just zero question. It was the 2 of them and everybody else, and then Jordan came along.
He won 3 straight MVPs or back to back? It's
not only that he won 3 straight MVPs. He never finished lower than 3rd, I think, in an 8-year span, something like that. But to Magic's credit, Magic had like a similar run. Very, very, like those guys. It was just every year top 3.
That's welcome to the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Duncan, again, he had his 2 wins. I could look it up now, but like when you look at, again, there was like a 4th place finish, a 5th place finish, like things like that. It's just again, they're all in the same tier. Flip a coin. Okay. I'm sorry to take the easy way out and say that ultimately, but that's how I feel. And it is what it is.
I have Magic a little higher, but it's interesting. So last thing I'll say about this tier, I have a question. If we're not doing an 80s draft, but if we did do an all decade draft and add the 80s, is your number one pick Larry Bird or is it Magic Johnson?
It's Bird because here's something I didn't realize. And again, look, there's been some fucking kooky guys to make all defense over the years. Larry Bird made some all defense teams, which is like the fact that people like considered him as like that. I didn't watch Larry Bird, so I can only go by what like the number. Like, and I know Magic was a pretty terrible defender.
Mm-hmm. I think Bird was like that to an extent. He was making it off his name. In the game,
he was so smart. He was the smartest player in the game. Not saying that Magic wasn't, but
so like the steal against Isaiah against the Pistons, like that gets lauded. What's not talked about is the consistent like Adrian Dantley taking him one-on-one in that series and multiple straight series that doesn't get talked about.
That's a name I've wrestled with over the last few weeks.
Look,
Adrian Dantley.
During the pandemic, I went through and tried to rewatch a lot of the games that I now have time to go rewatch, and I would not say Larry Bird he's one of the best scorers ever. I think there's a lot of, I mean, if we saw Larry Bird today, I'd just say Kevin Durant. And I think there's some as far as like effective scoring in the league. I think I would have Magic higher just for what he did to the point guard position, but
that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that you have the right order that they're both ahead of Duncan too. I would not. Yeah, this was never Duncan's league, but his contributions to the league are unparalleled over like a 19-year stretch.
Yep. Okay. Next tier. I struggle with these. Number 9, Shaq. Number 10, Kobe. Number 11, Kevin Durant. Number 12, Oscar Robertson.
I'm impressed how high you have Kobe Bryant. I know how much of a numbers guy you are. There's some advanced metrics that say Kobe shot too many long twos, and yet you still have him in your top 10 ever. You can't.
Again, you cannot deny how good he was for as long as he was.
I agree.
But here's the thing. And again, I really, really struggled putting together this list with how much to consider peak performance that did not last. Shaquille O'Neal should have been the greatest basketball player of all time. And quite frankly, I'm not sure it should have been close.
Yeah.
And he dicked around and his career ended earlier than it should have. And he took there were some years where he didn't come up big. Because
basketball wasn't challenging enough for him. As weird as that sounds, but
his conditioning or whatever.
He just he's the biggest guy on the court. Like, why do I need to work out other than the last month of the season? And then I'll show up, dominate the playoffs, and I'm a champion.
But it wasn't even like the most staggering stat to me in NBA history is that from 1999 to 2000, I'm going to say 5, maybe 6, Shaquille O'Neal was unquestionably the best player in the league when he wanted to be. Without, there was no conversation. He was the best player in the league. And he won 1 MVP.
Yeah.
1. And you could even make an argument that he was the best player in the league in 94, 95, and that he was the second best player in the league over the 3 years that obviously Jordan won a second three-peat. And he didn't sniff the MVP in a lot of those years. And it's unfathomable to me that he was, and even more than that, to go reference Bill Simmons again, you want to talk about who's the most untradeable asset, who's the most valuable asset in basketball for a decade, unquestioned, it was Shaquille O'Neal and 1 MVP, 1. And yet I couldn't put him behind Bryant because to me, that he still won 4 championships, Shaq, and he still had those stretches.
Yeah. you're talking about that 99 to 06 run, and yet from 94 to 98, he averaged 28, 12 on like 60% effective field goal percentage. Yeah.
Shaquille O'Neal's really good.
Yeah. So the next pushback, Kobe. Look, there's a case as far as impact goes that Kobe's number one on this list, not in a numbers. And then when you factor in the basketball argument, it's like we were talking about with The Dark Knight. There's no filmmaking argument to argue The Dark Knight's the greatest movie of all time. You can argue the impact Dark Knight had on the industry, on comic book movies, and on its stands are game changing forever. But Kobe, like there is a generation of people working hard, not basketball players. People working hard because they watched Kobe Bryant do it.
Michael Jordan is always going to be my version of that. And to a certain extent, Tiger Woods, actually. Kobe came along probably 2 years too late to have that sort of impact. And he still had a great impact on me. His passing obviously affected me a lot. Because I did find inspiration in him. But yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying.
Yeah. And then here's the interesting one. Kevin Durant at 11. Because I think a lot of people, so what's the case? Let me ask you that. What's the case?
The case is twofold. One, he was the best player on 2 championship teams. I think that's a pretty good case. He did win an MVP and he did finish. How many times did he finish second? I believe he finished second 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more importantly than any of that, when we think of eras of basketball, I think we're going to think of okay, you had, or the way I think of it, and this is, I've watched again for the last 30 years. In my mind, here's how it goes. It goes Jordan with a couple spoonfuls of Hakeem, who we're going to get to in a second. Then Shaq and Duncan. Then Kobe. Then LeBron and Durant. And to me, Durant is the second guy I think of when I think of this era. When I think of who were the best guys from that era, it's not close. Durant is the second best guy to LeBron.
So I will wait to say my rebuttal when we get to the next tier. But Oscar Robertson, if you just lay out the case real quick for everybody.
For why he's so low?
Why he's 12th? You can say why he's low, why you decided to put him 12th.
I put a lot. He was the best point guard in the league for a decade. He obviously won an MVP. I think he's low for me because his team didn't really have a lot of success until when he was with the Royals, it didn't have a lot of success. And then he went and joined up with Kareem and he obviously won a championship. But
averaged 29, 10, and 8 from 1961 to 1970.
Yeah, that's insane. He averaged a triple, but again, the triple double thing, I think a little bit of bloom is off that rose with the Russ over the last several years. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because watching Russ, I don't know that I'll have the words to properly explain to someone 20 or 30 years from now, this guy averaged a triple double essentially over the course of however many years Russ has done. I don't really give a shit. And then I'm going to be and why wasn't he one of the top 10 players in the league during that time? And I'm going to be well, here's why. Yeah. And I'm going to try to put it into words. And you hear some of the same stuff about Oscar. He wasn't that galvanized. And his teams didn't do anything.
I just think it was so hard to get 10 assists back then because nobody shot well. That's why Oscar Robertson is able to be a triple double, averaging that for an entire season was impressive because oh my God, they scored 2 points. Give that guy an assist. He made his job easier.
No, I don't disagree with you. Again, it's a shame that he made his only 2 NBA finals with Milwaukee. He made, if you go again, look at he won 2 playoff series with Cincinnati, 2. And they were in the early 60s when there were, again, as we've talked about, very few teams in the league. I have him 12th. I have him 12th.
Look, I'm honestly surprised you have him. It's not low, it's high. Like you have him 12th. I would have had him a little lower. But as far as your top 15 is concerned, I'm glad.
But at the same time, first team All-NBA for 9 consecutive years. Mm-hmm. Surrounding the MVP that he won, third place, he won second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place. He walked into the league, finished 5th in MVP. I mean, like, just the overall impact. He was just, I mean, I think he was just that good in his time. And you have to recognize that. Okay.
Final tier of your top 15.
Final tier of my top 15. Okay, here we go. Again, this is it's quibbling. It's quibbling between greatness. I have number 13, Steph Curry, number 14, Hakeem Olajuwon, number 15, Moses Malone.
So he's not a patron, but shout out to Schwinn, who I think he'll hear this if I decide to make this part of the preview. But Steph Curry, back when we did a Strickland crossover, he said Durant's never been there's also this weird like hatred that Schwinn has for Durant, but said that Durant's never been the best player on a finals team. And you literally just said he has been in the 2 finals MVPs that he won. And the argument has been made that Steph's impact on the league, Steph's impact on the Warriors was bigger than Durant's, and that Steph would be higher on an all-time list than Kevin Durant. And I don't know if I agree with Durant wasn't the best player on those 2 finals teams, but I tend to also agree about Steph's impact on the league a little bit to where I'd have him ahead of Durant. Your thoughts about putting Steph at 13 though?
It's pretty simple. He had two of the greatest seasons in NBA history. Mm-hmm. One obviously where he became the only unanimous MVP in the history of the league, which was pretty good. And then the year before that, when he should have been the unanimous MVP, and he just missed it. And then surrounding that, just to put it in perspective, like last year was probably his 3rd best individual season. Like I don't know what it's fair to say what is Kevin Durant's career if he doesn't go to Golden State, but by the same token, you could ask the same question about what is Steph's career if Kevin Durant doesn't come to Golden State. And I just look, they found lightning in a bottle, but to me, and this is going to come up, probably several hours from now when we're getting to the very end of this list, when I was putting the finishing touches on the 75, but like, I don't want to say that has everything as much to do with Clay as it does Steph, because obviously it doesn't. But what they found with, again, 2 of the, I don't know, whatever you want to say, 3, 4, 5 greatest shooters of all time, what they found, that was about them together in part, right? Mm-hmm. As great as Steph was. Like, nobody looks at the Bulls' 6 championships and be like, man, look at what Michael and Scottie accomplished together. Like, nobody looks at, I'm trying to think of it. Nobody looks at the Celtics' 3 championships. It's like, look at what Larry and Kevin McHale accomplished together. Nobody looks at I'm sorry. Nobody looks at LeBron's championships in Miami and be like, look at what LeBron and Wade accomplished together. No. I think there was something symbiotic about what Steph and Clay, and by the way, they only won 1 together before Durant came.
I think it's a very eloquent case. I think, and I have him fucking 13th. Oh no, I get it. I just, the whole league shooting threes now. We rejected that notion for an entire decade of D'Antoni and saying like the 3-pointer is a bad shot. You should be taking so many threes. You had Shaq and Charles Barkley saying all these jump shooting teams aren't going to succeed come playoff time. And then Steph showed up, and then the rest of the league was like, okay, we all need to shoot threes now. So
I didn't really factor that much. Like, okay, why not? If I did, Allen Iverson would be in my top 20 or top 25, because that dude probably affected how guys play as much as anyone in the last 20 years.
How so? You figure? In the isolation type of stuff?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be attributed more to Kobe than AI? AI's impact is more like culturally than anything else.
That too. But then, yeah, fine. Kobe would be a top 5 guy. And like, I don't, that's not how I'm judging what happened on the court. Not what happened.
Didn't making more threes than anybody ever, like multiple years in a row. Isn't that something that happened on the court?
Yes, and I'm factoring that in. That's why it's 13.
Why it's 13. Okay, no, that's fair.
Look, again, again, this is why ranking these players is stupid. Like, I feel pretty strongly about certain things in these rankings. Like, if you told, like, I'm not going to hear an argument that Steph Curry is better than Tim Duncan.
Oh no,
like that's not an argument. But if you want to tell me Steph Curry's better than Kevin Durant, like, I'm okay, that's fine. For me, I have him one tier below slightly.
What I heard you say is that you hate Steph Curry and that the gap between him and Oscar Robertson and Kevin Durant is big. In fact, Steph Curry is barely ahead of Hakeem. You were this close to putting him in your bottom 15 of the 75.